Hi, my name's Heather. I'm in Castle Rock, Colorado. My question is this. Donald Trump just passed an initiative or an executive order that allows him to fire longtime federal employees and basically replace them with people who will honor him and follow him and pledge loyalty to him. Is that something that can be undone?
I was a Republican all my life. Now I'm voting all the way blue. I'm on the blue tsunami. I'm very disgusted with the Republican Party, and every time I think about them, I feel a knot in my stomach and I get nauseated. It's that bad. So I am sick and tired of this 4 years just division and hatred, and I cannot speak to some of my family members, and I'm sick of it.
It's Wednesday, October 28th, just 6 days from the election. And if you're like us, you are just so very tired. Today is Economy Day on Vote for America, and we'll be talking with the Lincoln Project's own Michael Steele, national security analyst Clint Watts, and a Lincoln voter living abroad with a warning for all of us. And now our host, Lincoln Project co-founder Jennifer Horn.
And welcome to Vote for America on LPTV. I am so glad that you are joining us today. Only 6 days until the election is here. Pedal to the metal all the way, people. We are going full strength, full speed until this is all over. I'm so glad that you're with us today. As you can see, we are in our new studio. We're going to be here Thursday, Friday, Monday. Stay with you right up until Election Day. And also, I just want to remind you, because several of you express concern on a regular basis, we are doing everything we have to stay safe and to keep each other safe. Everybody in the studio, we live in our own little sort of COVID protection bubble so that we don't expose each other to anything. Everybody wears masks. If you're not sitting at this table, you have a mask on. When I walk away from the table, I put my mask on. We are doing everything we can to stay safe. And I hope that all of you are too. Now, we want to share some more reminders with you, like we do at the top of every show. We've got some voter registration information for you. It is officially closed across the country. Every state has closed their pre-election voter registration. So if you have not registered yet, you may have missed your opportunity. However, there are 20 states out there that allow what is called same-day registration. You can go to vote.org to find out if your state is one of them. For example, in New Hampshire, where I voted for 17 years, you can register on Election Day. You go as if you're going to vote in person. You get online, you get inside, you let them know that you are not registered and you'd like to vote to register today. They'll walk you through a process to get you registered and then give you your ballot so that you can vote. But there are only 20 states that do that. So please go to vote.org and find out if your state is one of them. Let's see what else is important today. I want to we've got this tweet we put out that the Lincoln Project put out today that's got some important information on it for you as well. Directed at all of you who are thinking about that you still might vote by mail. If you have your mail-in ballot or your absentee ballot and you have not mailed it yet, we've reached that point where it may not arrive on time. So here are some alternatives for you. You can drop your ballot off in person, wherever you would, again, go to vote.org to make sure, probably at your town hall or your Board of Elections. Use an official Dropbox location. A lot of states have Dropboxes. Again, vote.org. I'm going to keep saying that so you can find it where yours are. Or you can vote early in person. If your state has early in person voting, you can check your state's deadline for that at vote.org as well. Or you may just decide to vote on Election Day. But I just want to warn you, if you were planning to vote by mail, absentee ballot or vote by mail, and you haven't mailed it yet, you probably have reached that point now where it is in danger of not arriving in time. So we hope that you will consider one of these other options, or go to vote.org to find out, and go to vote.org to find out where all the drop boxes and different locations are in your state. Just don't drop it into the mail, because I am worried that it probably won't get there in time to be counted. So I also want to talk to you this morning before we get started with our guests about something that just happened. The president, as you know, is on what we keep calling kind of a super spreader tour of campaign rallies. He was in Lansing, Michigan, and was talking about the economic hardships of the COVID economy. And of course, his usual answer is always just open everything up and send everybody out there, no matter what kind of diseases are being spread around. And he had this new campaign pitch for women that I found particularly interesting, and I'd like to share with you now.
Your husbands, they want to get back to work, right? They want to get back to work. We're getting your husbands back to work, and everybody wants it.
It continues to shock me just how out of touch and sexist this president is, just instinctively. As he's trying to get women to vote for him, he's encouraging them by letting them know that he wants to get their husbands back to work. what about them? What about all the women? What about the 76,852,000 women who were in the workforce in 2019? Over 57% of women in this country work, and they account for nearly half of the total American labor force. And there was one study last year that I found that showed that nearly 40% of American households are headed by a female primary breadwinner. It is shocking to me how sexist and elitist this president is. And it is no wonder at all that women continue to leave him in droves. That's my top of the mind thought for the day, especially as we're talking about the economy, the critical role that women play in driving the economy, in small businesses, in being the primary breadwinner, feeding their children, putting a roof over their heads. The contributions that women make to this economy are significant. And it's just one more way that this president dismisses and demeans women when he talks to us at a campaign rally and promises to put our husbands back to work. With that, I am very happy, and actually I'm very excited about our next guest. He's one of the people that I really enjoy talking to when he comes on the show. He is the former chairman of the Republican National Committee and recently publicly and enthusiastically endorsed Joe Biden for president. You've seen the commercial that the Lincoln Project made with that endorsement several times on this show. It's very moving. I'm really happy to welcome Michael Steele. Michael, how are you today?
I'm great, Jennifer. How are you doing? Hey, girl, we are just a few days away. Everybody's excited.
I know. It's so close. Isn't it crazy, Michael? I was just thinking the other day that I think when this show started, we were saying 60 days until the election. And now it's holy cow, it's right there. It's less than a week away. I'm overwhelmed by it. In addition to the way this president diminishes and demeans women, he and his administration and members of his administration continue to message to minorities in this country in ways that I find, I guess, politically fascinating would be the diplomatic way to say it. We know that Black Americans make up a substantial voter base, and that they generally vote for Democrats. And Joe Biden's working awfully hard, I think, to win that vote. What do you think about Trump's approach to this?
Well, it's an interesting one, and it has potential. I mean, look, there are a number of African American men in particular. Black women aren't buying anything Trump is selling. They're way too deep in the weeds against him in terms of a host of things. But for a lot of Black men, they do ask themselves in answering the president, what do I have to lose? And it's like, well, it can't be anything more than I've already lost. And so he's kind of played on that particular angle with some in the Black community and has gotten some resonance there because there is legitimate, concerns about where this all goes and where it has gone. And so you can always make the case, well, what have they done for you lately? It can't get any worse with me, and then do nothing. And that's been the problem. I mean, if you take a moment and take stock and look back over the last 3 years, Black men have to ask themselves, so what's changed? Black unemployment is the lowest it's ever been. That's great. But if, that employment is not one that puts you on a trajectory to, move up the ladder and to have greater opportunities and improvement, okay, what do you do about that? So there's always the next question that needs to get answered that the president doesn't answer. And that's where it falls flat with a lot of African Americans.
And that's a great answer. I appreciate the insight for that because it kind of addresses the practicality of this too for a lot of people. But you can't ignore the fact or deny the fact that being able to pay your bills and take care of your family is always an influential, issue when you're trying to figure out who to vote for.
Right.
I've been really disturbed over the years at just how racist this president has been in a way that I think is almost instinctive to him. And recently, I think it was just yesterday, Jared Kushner said something really weird to a reporter when he was being interviewed. Let's share that with our audience and then explain to me how that possibly makes sense.
Thing we've seen in a lot of the black community, which is mostly Democrat, is that President Trump's policies are the policies that can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about, but he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful.
Does Donald Trump want the black community to be more successful than the black community wants to be?
Look, that is such a load of bogus crap. I can't even begin to. It makes no sense. But it is. That's what white privilege sounds like when it's talking about the black community. This idea, this stereotype, preconceived, cocked up notion that somehow we're less incentivized unless we have someone like a Donald Trump. But even then, that's not, you got to want it more than he does. I mean, if people weren't giving jack a thought about Donald Trump before he became president, Donald Trump ain't never doing anything for black folks. I mean, this was the man who wanted to hang the Central Park Five. He didn't want to give those young black men, once they were proven innocent, a job in his properties and say, hell, let me help you now that you've been, wrongly accused, but, justified and found innocent. I'm going to prove the point. Come on. I mean, so this reality always comes back when it comes to Donald Trump. We always get back to truth. He's a 74-year-old white man of a certain generation who has an idea about black people that is locked in a time long gone by. And now he's got his son-in-law out here articulating this crazy, Donald Trump can't want more for black people than they want for themselves. In other words, we don't have enough ingenuity and enough enterprise, and that Donald Trump is trying his hardest, but we've got to want it too. Okay, I almost said something. I'm just
and
my
it's
tongue.
Such a you bite your tongue. I'm not going to bite mine. Because when I heard him say that, I just thought it made me think about the way that Donald Trump talks about women all the time. Yes. As if anything that we have in our lives or any ambition we have or anything that we want to approach is something he gives us permission for. That somehow he's the father and he gives us permission. Or in this case, he's the father and he's going to give you opportunity. He's going to look what he's giving you, but you have to want it for yourself. And I also want to be careful that we don't excuse him as being of a certain generation, because the candidate that you've endorsed, Joe Biden, does not talk this way.
Right.
He does not use these dog whistles. He does not call white nationalists good people, that there might be some good people amongst them. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Joe Biden. You are a former Republican National Committee chairman, and you have endorsed Joe Biden, and you've gone so far as to make a commercial with that endorsement. So, what is it about Joe Biden, other than the fact that he isn't a blazing, openly racist person, that he has earned your vote?
Yeah, well, and I'll pivot off the crazy and stupid of the father and the son-in-law with this. What they don't appreciate is the blood, sweat, and tears that were a part of building this country by African Americans when they were enslaved, when they were subject to Jim Crow, when they were fighting for all the rights and are still to this day fighting for these rights. They built economy, they built communities, they built neighborhoods. They facilitated this wonderful experiment to get off the ground. And what I appreciate about a Joe Biden is that he appreciates that. Yeah, he stepped in it from time to time, but that's not where his heart is. When he's misspoken, he's come back and said, my bad, I looked at it the wrong way, I said the wrong thing. And even on something like the crime bill,
right.
He's taken a lot of heat, and he's not pointed the finger around and said, well, everybody else was supporting it too. He's owned up to where
right.
Even something 30 years ago fell short in how it impacted the community. He's taking that kind of ownership. He didn't say, well, I'm not responsible. Even though the Black Caucus stood behind him and with him in getting that bill passed, that legislation passed. African-American leaders around the country at the time being in the middle of the crime spree that was overwhelming the Black community, stood with the Joe Bidens of that time to pass this legislation. He didn't look at them and blame them too. He took the responsibility because he was the elected official. He was the author of the idea. And so that, for me, tells all you need to know about these two men and why one should be president and why the other shouldn't. Because one, Joe Biden is willing to say, look, my bad. Okay, let's get it right. All right. The other, Donald Trump, like, I ain't nothing to do with that. Oh, it's their fault. Oh, it's Dr. Fauci.
Right.
That's his stupid. That's not me. That's, Mike Pence. I put him in charge. So I think we need to understand who we're talking about, which is why, for me, Jennifer, I stress so much character in my coming out in support for Joe Biden, because that, at the end of the day, trumps every policy. It beats every piece of legislation. If the individual who is championing those things, who are pushing those policy, is prepared to say, I didn't get it exactly right, let's try to get it better, that tells you a lot about their character.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that for a lot of those Republicans who are crossing the line this year and voting for Joe Biden, I think character is a big,
It is.
probably one of the most persuasive issues that we've seen with them. Yeah. But you just said something. I'm going to sort of go off track just for a second here. And you were talking about the crime bill that Joe Biden's had to sort of answer to in this campaign. But the truth is, for decades, Republicans have really resisted the idea of criminal justice reform. Why is that? Because when I look at these issues, I don't think that I have to choose between justice reform and supporting good police officers. But in this campaign, and especially from Donald Trump, he's got this weird thing about, strength and that, he's for the police. Well, we're all for good police. What is the resistance to really embracing the idea of true criminal justice reform?
I think in the past, and you and I both are familiar with this from our service and leadership inside the Republican Party, whether it's nationally, state, and local, however it played itself out, is that at the time there was no political expediency in that. We had our constituencies locked down. We didn't need to expand much beyond that controlled base. Donald Trump finds himself in a situation where it's much more untenable. The base has moved off. They know, they've been tracking that since the day he was inaugurated. You had 1 million women show up on the mall the day after the inauguration to protest his inauguration. So if you're smart, you want to keep your finger on that pulse and see how much of that eats into the base that you have right now. And it is very clear that became a political opportunity, as was later revealed, to sort of signal to Black men, because we know the black female vote's not going to follow Donald Trump, but at least we can get a portion of the Black male vote to come over, and that will have an impact to some degree. So there's a level of cynicism involved there, which I don't appreciate. There are some good men and women inside the GOP who have for some time fought up that hill. In the past, I recall to mind Rand Paul and talking with him when I was chairman about these types of issues. But there was no will inside the caucus, the Republican caucus, to take something like that idea and actually make it foundational to other things we were doing, as we were talking about, the free enterprise system, now linking that to education and linking that to criminal justice and linking that to, issues like welfare reform and things like that. There was not very little interest in that. But now it's a political expediency because it's about the numbers. And if we can shave some of the numbers of the Black vote off of Joe Biden with this particular bright, shiny object, then let's do that.
Yeah, that's discouraging when we think about motivation, but hopefully this conversation, when we move into the next administration, will bring some real progress in that area. Let's real quickly, before I lose you, let's do a recap kind of on the state of the race. The numbers, if you're somebody who's following polls all the time, you're probably feeling really encouraged right now, because certainly the numbers look good, not just in the national polls, but even in the swing states, as we're seeing some of this kind of all start to gel in these final days. If you're like me, Michael, I on January 20th, I will feel like I can breathe easy again. Like I just, the poll, I'm so nervous until every last vote is counted, no matter what. What's kind of your
I'm with
big
you.
picture view of the state of the race?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm nervous because I know too much. You know, you and I've been chairman. We know too much, right? We know how these things work and why.
We've been through too many of these.
Yes, and you know. So here's my caution. Look, I'm going to put it straight to people because that's the only way I know how to do it. I'm not that comfortable and secure with the white female vote, the suburban white female vote at this point. I haven't been. I've been on record for 8-9 months now that I think that's the weakest link for the Democrats. And I think you see that in states like Pennsylvania and in places like Ohio. And I think that's something that needs to be paid attention to. There's a reason why Donald Trump has made the particular dog whistles and created this illusion around white suburbia that he has. And I think at the end of the day that, you know, the combination of concern about a Section 8 house being built in your neighborhood and the value of your 401k, I just don't trust that that's a reliable vote. So you have to overcompensate for that, I think, as a campaign. And I think that's what you see Joe Biden doing by going to some of these other states that typically a Democrat doesn't go to, and making the kinds of appeals that are necessary. So I don't trust that. I'm concerned about the Hispanic vote in places like Florida and Arizona and Nevada. Again, because there's been a specific appeal that we were just talking about to Black men, the same has been made to Hispanic men, who, and I was watching an interview on MSNBC just recently where, you know, two Venezuelans, a man and a woman, were talking about why they were supporting Donald Trump. And, I was sitting there listening to them talk about, well, what the leader of Venezuela was doing, had done was different because he actually did it. Donald Trump only talked about it. I was like, dude, that's the beginning of how it works. You know, I talk about it and I do it. So there's a lot to be concerned about. A lot to be concerned about.
It's scary.
A lot of work still to do. Everyone needs to you, the point you were making earlier, Jennifer, forget the postal system at this point.
Vote.
Go stand in a line and vote, or take your ballot and put it in a designated drop box, because that's the safest way to make sure that it gets there and gets counted.
Well, then I'm going to say it 100 times before this show's over. You're absolutely right. You've got to get your ballot in. Then let's finish with this then, Michael. You're talking about those suburban women voters that you're just not sure about. We see what the numbers are. I think you made some really legitimate points there about where their concern comes from. So if you've got 30 seconds, if you have an undecided Republican woman voter sitting in front of you, what would you say?
Is Donald Trump an example for your kids? I mean, because when you say that's my guy, you're telling your children that's my guy. And then they take that, and when they start behaving and acting and responding that way, so you got to think about these things. We used to hold the presidency up to our children as a model, as an example of not just something they could do someday, but someone they could be like someday. And all the things that you teach them, all the values you teach them about not lying, not cheating, not bullying people, not calling women names, all of these things, that's your role model. And that matters to me as a parent. So think about that. It's not just your 401k. And no, I'm sorry, Black folks aren't going to raid your neighborhood because they're already there. They're your neighbor around the corner. We're already in the suburbs. So all of this crazy noise, dial it down, and think about the future of your children, and think about their health. You have a president who's doing super spreader events 10 blocks away from you in the state next door to you. And think about what that says and what that may mean to you and your kids potentially in 6 weeks. So that's what I'm thinking about. And that's what I hope they think about as well, as they prepare their ballots and go vote.
I really appreciate that, Michael. I think it speaks to the heart of what voters really care about in this moment in time. And we have to do what's best and what's right now
Yeah.
for our country and for our families. And thank you for the reminder for everybody to vote. It's great to have you here, former chairman
Always
of the Republican
good.
National Committee and a Joe Biden voter, Michael Steele. Thank you. Have a great day,
You
Michael.
too, Jennifer. Take care now.
So thank you. So, and I'm so glad that he brought it up. And everybody's going to be reinforcing the same message for the next few weeks, for the next few days, how important it is to vote. You need to get your vote in. It's not an overstatement to say that this is the most important election of our lifetimes. And that's exactly why people are voting. It's how they're voting. They're voting in record numbers. More than 69 million Americans have already cast ballots, absolutely shattering all records. We want to see you celebrating your vote. That's why we love to see those selfies. We'd like to see you celebrating democracy by tweeting the photos of your vote using the hashtag Vote for America selfie. Send us an email. We may just feature you on the show. Getting out the vote is why we're here. And that's what we're asking you to help us do. You inspire others when you put your picture of yourself voting up on social media, and your friends and family, and now with us, so many others see you doing it and get the message out there of just how important it is. We had this really cool story from a viewer named Kiani in Ohio. She shared her story after she dropped off her ballot. She said, I dropped off my ballot at the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections before they opened, so there was no one passing out I voted stickers. So I just made my own when I got to work. I love that. I love how enthusiastic people are wanting to share with us their votes and the fact that they have voted and the effort that they go to make sure that everybody who sees them as they go through the day knows that they have voted as well. We're going to be back in just a couple of minutes with a story from one of our Lincoln voters. But before that, we're going to bring you a little bit of information from the Lincoln Project.
Imagine that night, tensions high, a nation torn apart, a plot here in Baltimore City to assassinate a newly elected president on his way to inauguration, and to plunge the country into chaos. Abraham Lincoln disembarked at this train station and under pre-dawn skies made his way unscathed and on to greatness. In the days ahead, we may face a crisis of similar proportion, an outlaw president clinging to power and defying the will of the people. For 4 years, many have said there will come a moment. Well, this is the moment, because this ballot is like none ever cast. Now, I'm a lifelong Republican, and I'm still a Republican. But this ballot is how we restore the soul of our nation, electing a good man, Joe Biden, and a trailblazer, Kamala Harris, and ensure an orderly transfer of power. Or plunge our country into chaos. America or Trump? I choose America.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
American conservatism is strong again, a daily presence in America, but a once proud tradition has been warped by Donald Trump, turned cruel, hateful, divisive, and unchristian. Our principles, our values are unrecognizable in him. So much of the work for which we have strived for so long is locked in place for decades to come. Now, it's time to tend to the wounds to America's soul and bring her back to health. To embrace the conservative ideals we hold so dear, like personal integrity, faith, family,
and Ashley,
simple goodness, and human decency. It's time our leadership reflected our principles. It's time to love one another again.
my father,
It's time to
my
elect
hero,
Joe Biden.
And welcome back to Vote for America on LPTV. I love that last commercial that you just saw from Republicans and Independents for Biden. The Republicans and Independents for Biden is a coalition of the Lincoln Project. And we have been very involved through that project as well, getting out the good word about Joe Biden. So I hope you enjoyed that and that you'll share that one with friends and families because it makes the case for Joe Biden, which is so important. Our next guest, I'm really happy to have. He's got a fascinating perspective on what's happening in the world right now. He's an American citizen who's living in Italy and has had the opportunity to see how President Trump's presidency and his handling of this global pandemic has impacted the way that our friends around the world see us. Coming to us from Italy, he's a Lincoln voter, Lee Evans. Good morning, Lee. It's great to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm really happy that you're with us today. And I know that you've spent quite a bit of time in Italy as an American citizen and really had the opportunity to sort of see firsthand, face to face, how Donald Trump's presidency is actually having an impact on America's position in the world. Give us some understanding of how you see that has changed.
Well, as an American coming to Europe, I first came here in the 2000s, and people are open and they're warm and they tend to be gracious and they really never questioned you or your motives. Now, people approach you entirely differently as an American. People are either indifferent or they exhibit outright distrust. And now, two subjects always come up when people discover that you're American. They always want to know where you stand on race, and they always want to know whether or not you support Donald Trump. And depending on what answer you give them, they either treat you gracious and kind, or they completely write you off.
Boy, that's discouraging to hear, especially when you realize the way that can translate into the leadership of these countries around the world that have always been our friends and how they're impacted by the changes under this presidency. Now, Lee, I know that in the past you've talked about the differences between a Reagan Republican and a Trump Republican.
Yes.
And I loved hearing that because that whole idea of a Reagan Republican is such a much more traditional, much more positive, I think, approach to republicanism. What is the distinction for you between a Reagan Republican and a Trump Republican?
This is very easy. A Reagan Republican knows the difference between right and wrong, and they know how to live their life in such a way that it shows, the difference between right and wrong. Because as Americans, there are certain truths that we hold to be self-evident that aren't in the Constitution. They're just part of being a decent person. And having an intact sense of right and wrong is how I know I'm a Lincoln Republican, I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican, and it's also how the rest of the world knows that I'm not a Trump Republican.
So you're a lifelong Republican, though, which,
Yes.
as am I, and you are a lifelong Republican from Alabama, where you have some family and friends and people you care about who are not supporting Joe Biden, who are still in for Donald Trump. How do those conversations go? Are you able to have, kind of rational conversations with people? How has you splitting from Donald Trump impacted your relationships in your family?
Well, to answer your first question, unfortunately, there is no such thing as a rational conversation with a Trump supporter in Alabama. It goes from zero to a heated argument immediately, and there's no way to approach it. And, we love our families no matter how imperfect we may think they are, and they love us for the same reasons. So you learn to live with them and accept their differences. But it's particularly hard because I come from a very unique family dynamic. My father died when I was very young, and my mother raised all 10 children by herself. And I have 9 older sisters. Some of my sisters are diehard Trump supporters, despite his sexist, misogynistic views. And we all grew up in the same house. We all know right from wrong. And it's not just confusing for me, it's really disturbing, and it makes me worry because you can't claim to be a Christian woman and support Donald Trump. So I try to understand them and love them as much as I can, but I still call them out for the many reasons that they really can't fairly support Donald Trump. And I made it abundantly clear that I am no longer a member of the Republican Party until it recovers from this.
I love that you talk about that. Of course, we love our family anyway. There seems like there are so many families that have sort of forgotten that or abandoned that as we've gone through these really divisive times with this president. I have to tell you, I'm also one of 10 children. I'm so sorry that you lost your dad so young. I'm also one of 10 children. There were 8 daughters my parents had 8 daughters. Um, and what I have to just to share with you, I've had this conversation with my dad in the past, and I have said to him, and maybe you want to share this with your sisters at some point, that it's because of what you taught me, Dad, that I reject Donald Trump. And maybe, the conversation with your sisters is it's because of how much you care about them and how much you value women that you cannot support Donald Trump. As I hear you talk, it just sounds so familiar to me. It just sounds so familiar to me. So before I lose you, let's imagine that you have, some Republican women in front of you, some undecided Republican women like your sisters, and you could have 30 seconds uninterrupted to make the case not just against Donald Trump, but for Joe Biden. What would you say to them?
I would say think about right and wrong, what you know is right and what you know is wrong, and vote based on that decision. Because if you vote based on what you know is right, there's only one decision.
Lee, I appreciate that so much. I'm so glad that you're here. And I just want to say I really appreciate your willingness to share this from a personal perspective, because
Oh,
I think that
absolutely.
is so important. I think that is so much more persuasive right. And it's not always easy to do. You show a lot of courage and a lot of integrity. So Lee Evans, he's a lifelong Republican who's now supporting Joe Biden, joining us from Italy. It is really really wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much, Lee. Take care.
Thank you for everything. It's been a privilege and an honor to be here tonight.
Thank you. So I misspoke there for a minute, but I just found it so sweet that that he is concerned about his sisters, that he has that empathy for women, and he admitted he's confused. He doesn't quite understand exactly why some of his sisters would continue to support Donald Trump. But these are the tough conversations that we have to have. And I think what we can learn from Lee is that we can have those conversations and still love those people that we are disagreeing with. It doesn't have to be an attack. So I'm just grateful to all of you out there who have reached out to us, wanting and willing to share your personal stories. And as we go forward and we keep reminding you how important it is to vote, we should take this opportunity to also remind you how important it is to get others to vote. It's not over yet. You have to continue to have these conversations and try to persuade those people in your life that are on the fence, and we might be able to bring them over to the Joe Biden side of the line. So thank you to Lee Evans for being with us today. I'm very happy as well to have our next guest with us. You're going to find him fascinating. I can promise you that. We've been trying to get him here to join us for a while now. He is a former special agent for the FBI, where he served on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. He is now a consultant on various topics of national security. And here to talk to us about this election, Clint Watts. Clint, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Clint, let's start right ahead by let's just jump right into this election. You and your teams are experts on things like national security. You're on the FBI Terrorism Task Force. As you are looking at this election, what are you seeing, and what are your primary concerns?
Yeah, so over the last year and a half or so, I've been working with teams trying to track foreign interference in the US election and really focus in on what Russia might be doing, but also Iran and China. What's been fascinating is Russia has really kept up their playbook. They haven't changed it at all. And in fact, they've gone even harder to a degree in trying to divide the country and get it fighting with itself. And if America is fighting America, we can't fight the Russians. And so what's interesting is they continue to play to the Trump base to create animosity and angst, to create anger. And at the same point, they try and infiltrate the political left of the United States, to really pit them against other candidates, essentially dividing and conquering us as a country, but doing it through political warfare. When we go into next week, though, if you'd talked to me a year ago, I would have told you we were worried about Russian disinformation and influence like my teams have worked on in 2016. That's not going to be the case this time. What we're looking at this time is American made disinformation, American made divisiveness. That really comes down to political leaders using these antagonisms against each other in ways that are uncivil. And so my teams have almost switched entirely now to try and watch mobilizations to polling places, and specifically would race-based groups like white supremacists or anti-government groups show up under the belief that the election is rigged, that there's voter fraud, and would that bring counter-protesters to that ballot box or that polling place, which would lead to violence. So when we're fast forward now 4 years, it's not Russia fighting America, it's America fighting America. And that's really due to the nature of our politics currently in this country.
Well, let's go into that a little bit more deeply then. As you're talking about the fear about what can happen, just opposing groups within America. You mentioned white nationalists, and then of course counter protesters. Are you concerned about there being actual violence in these interactions? And then a step beyond that, for folks who are going to be at the polls, because we want to encourage them to get out there and to make sure that their voices are heard. What role do just the average people standing on line? They might be on a line that's 2 or 3 hours long. What role, if any, can they play in trying to make sure this doesn't happen? So I know those are kind of two big questions, but
sure. I'll take them both. I like the big questions. So on the first one, what is the threat of violence on election day? It's very low. I want people to understand that the chance of violence at their individual polling place is very low. But the idea of intimidation, poll watchers, we've heard, both the president and other elected officials say there's got to be poll watchers out there. No, there doesn't. We have institutions, we have processes for conducting elections, and vigilante poll watchers or vigilante groups showing up have no place at those locations. We are tracking, different groups that are talking about mobilizing, and we're waiting for them to point to certain places that we think they might go. And the good news is, I have to say, whether it's Department of Homeland Security's Cyber and Infrastructure Agency, which is really trying to protect the vote, or the states, for the most part, they've been remarkably good at working through both defending against foreign interference and hacking, developing mail-in ballots so that it can have a secure election, and now securing the polling places. It's really a question of, is it overwhelmed? Is the system overwhelmed? And can we get the truth out to people on election day so that they don't feel fearful? That comes to your second question, I think, which is when people are lining up at the polling place, there are some things to think about. One, there will probably be some sort of security in the area, and I don't think they need to be afraid. But tips and leads are what helps law enforcement do their job. I really do think our state and local law enforcement officers, Department of Homeland Security and state Homeland Security offices do want to protect the election. They're taking it very seriously. I read a very empowering story today about how hard postal workers are working to try and make sure that your ballot gets there. And I do think that every American that's working in every one of these institutions, for the most part, really wants to make sure that the right thing is done, that they fulfill their duty on election day. So I would say the big thing is, hey, call in tips and leads, and even use things like social media to alert people to what you think might be interference in the election, from anything from poll watchers that aren't really poll watchers, or groups mobilizing to polls as it comes. The faster we know about it, the quicker we can do something about it. And that's also how state and local officials can employ their resources to try and protect those polling places as well.
And we're going to share some information a little later in the show for our viewers on the best and easiest way that they can share that kind of information on election day as well. But let's take what you're talking about, the what's happening in this country and how it's incited, and look ahead beyond election day. This president has been trying to undermine people's faith in the outcome of the election for months now. What are you guys seeing? Are you seeing any sort of legitimate threat or concern about how people will respond if this election is close, if it takes a long time to get certified results, if it ends up in the courts, if there's any sort of uncertainty about the outcome of the election? What are you guys seeing there?
Yeah, so I think there's several ways to think about it. From the foreign interference space, while we've heard about Russia, Iran, and China all trying to interfere in the election, it is definitely Russia to the level 10 of 10. And by that, I mean they're also pivoting in terms of conspiracies that undermine democracy. The long run goal of Russia is not to elevate one candidate or another, but to destroy democracy and people's faith in it as an institution. And so back in May, we started to see Kremlin news outlets really just amplifying and echoing what the president was saying about false claims regarding mail in ballots and voter fraud. And they use this to essentially undermine and subvert the system. Beyond that, I think what's most troubling is really something I talked about when I testified in 2017. Most people focused on the Russian active measures part of it. But what I was trying to also illustrate is over the longer term is we have to know what the basis is for fact and fiction. If you don't know what the truth is, then you can become apathetic about democracy,
Right.
maybe don't want to participate in voting, or it's impossible to build policy that unites the country. So if everyone's just choosing their own facts and only shaping their own reality, ultimately we can't have a common reality for a greater America, which we advance around the world and secure at home. So that's my big challenge, I think, for my team is how do we quickly put information out into the public space about what the realities are around voter fraud and election rigging, potential mobilizations post election day. It seems as if most people think it would be 10 to 14 days before the election results can be fully certified. Now, that could change just based on the speed and the degree to which the outcome sort of unfolds over the next few days and into the next week, meaning that if it is a very decisive victory one way or another, this could end that sort of conspiracy altogether. And I think the last point is we have to ask our elected leaders and politicians, is it really about their gain or America's gain? Meaning, at what point will you accept the results of the election, whether you win or lose, and move on to make the country better rather than trying to make yourself better at a personal cost, a greater cost to the country?
Yeah, that's a great point at the very end. So much of that can come from the either candidate supporters as well, that the supporters need to accept the outcome of the election and not contribute to the kind of unrest and chaos that actors like Russia would like to be able to use those results to create in our country. Before I lose you, Clint, let me ask you, sort of step outside the election even a little bit. You spent a lot of time at the FBI. We've both made the point that this president is behaving in a way that is intended to undermine our trust and our faith in these important institutions. Just kind of from a general perspective, how do you look at the FBI these days? How is Bill Barr doing in his position? And what are your thoughts about the way things are working over there right now?
It's been fascinating to watch the combination of Bill Barr and Chris Wray, both appointees under the Trump administration, how they chose two entirely different paths about conducting their job. The FBI director, that position is to be impartial and for the American public to trust that institution to bring and administer justice. And I have to say, I think Chris Wray has done about as good a job as any human being could do, being put in the position he was in, coming in after James Comey, coming in while the president tweets at him, degrades him in public, tells others that he shouldn't be believed or trusted. That is a very tough position to be in. I feel like he's been very forthright and straightforward with Congress and with the American public. Separately, what I would note is that Attorney General Barr has very much seen himself as not the Attorney General for the United States, but for President Trump. And I think that's been deeply sad for me personally, having worked in the government, that justice isn't maybe being pursued evenly, that he sees his role as helping secure the president another term, and that it's actually not administering justice in the country because there's too much distraction on implementing justice. I have to say, even Attorney General Sessions before Attorney General Barr, you could disagree with his politics, but he was fulfilling the function. He did have a agenda on crime and national security, which he was pursuing. He tried, I think, in many ways to avoid the president and could not. And what I see in Attorney General Barr is the opposite, which is information is filtered through a very biased selection out to the public so that it's very difficult for us to know, feel, and trust that it's really an institution that's providing justice for all Americans and not just paving the way for the president.
You think it's going to be enough for the American people if Joe Biden does win this election, to simply have a new president to sort of to start over. I worry about the long-term mistrust that has been sown by this president, and what does it take to get that back?
I never pin my hopes on one person. It takes a collective. You know, this country is a formation of its constituents, and so I Joe Biden, I hope he makes a great president, but I'm not going to count on him. I think one of the things that's been remarkable is working with so many young people over the last year that they're really fighting for a better America as well. So I hope whoever is president come 2021 decides to lead the country and do it in a positive way. But I don't know anyone, at least in my orbit, that's counting on the president, whoever it may be, to bring about solutions for the biggest problems. Climate change, it's here, it's happening, and it will be something that will affect this country over the next 20 years more than anything else. COVID-19 has wreaked all sorts of damage to us personally in terms of divisiveness with our peers, family, like the gentleman that was on before you. But looking even further beyond, China is the source of this virus, and yet they're accelerating with this virus, meaning they are moving past us. And then the other parts are really about what do we want to be as a country in the next 4 or 5 years when we look at 2 administrations. I've always known, whether it's Republican or Democrat, whether I was in the military or the FBI, what I was fighting for and what I stood for and what I wanted to advance around the world. Right now, I'm hoping, if nothing else, in the next administration, or even without an administration, the American people decide what they want to be and what we want to be to each other.
Clint, that's beautiful. I appreciate you being here so much. This has been a great, very informative opportunity for our viewers. Clint Watts, formerly of the FBI. Terrific to have you Terrific to have you here today, Clint. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I love what he talked about at the very end there. So much, everything, the misinformation, his experience at the FBI, his insights on Bill Barr at the FBI today. But the most important thing he talked about that whole time was at the very end there, that we, the people, have to decide what we want to be as a nation. We have to, figure out some sort of common purpose and join together to work toward that, regardless of our political differences. So glad to have Clint Watts with us here today. And we have a lot more show coming for you still, including some important information about how you can be involved in reporting voter intimidation at the polls. And we'll have that for you when we come back. But first, a little bit more for you from the Lincoln Project.
There's mourning in Iowa. Today, hundreds of thousands of Americans have died from a deadly virus Donald Trump ignored, praising China's response instead of heeding the warnings, then blaming them to cover his own failures. With the economy in shambles, people across Iowa are still out of work, one of the worst economies in decades. This afternoon, millions of Americans will apply for unemployment. And with their savings run out, many are giving up hope. Millions worry that a loved one won't survive COVID-19. There's mourning in Iowa. And under the leadership of Donald Trump, our state is weaker and sicker and poorer. And now, Americans are asking, if we have another 4 years like this, will there even be an America?
Since the United States first declared independence, American women have served in the military. Through world wars, Korea, and Vietnam, women served however they could, as nurses, mechanics, as pilots. Over the next 50 years, women's roles officially expanded to air, sea, and ground combat. In the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, women have commanded soldiers in combat They fought bravely.
You just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just right on your way. You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy.
They rescued their fellow soldiers, saving their lives.
Maybe Brandy must be a pretty picture you drop into
John and
these.
Dennis thought I should be.
They were wounded.
You know, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
They were taken prisoner.
I did try and fuck her. She was married.
Huge news there.
I moved on her like a bitch.
And they made the ultimate sacrifice for their brothers and sisters in arms. Women are heroes, on and off the battlefield. Donald Trump is too weak to respect them. He doesn't deserve to lead our brave women in uniform.
Veterans for Responsible Leadership and the Lincoln Project are responsible for the content of this advertising.
And welcome back to Vote for America on LPTV. I have some important information for you. This is what it is all about, making sure that every person gets their vote cast and as part of that effort, the Lincoln Project has been partnering with an awesome organization called CSAY 2020. You can find csay2020.com. It's a free and anonymous platform for voters to report instances of voter suppression in real time. You can report any form of voter suppression or voter intimidation, misinformation. As we've talked about on the show, there are so many different ways that people and groups can try to get between you and the chance for you to cast your ballot, whether it's people who are electioneering too close to the polling entrance, people who might be trying to make you feel uncomfortable by their presence, open carry, as Zach was talking about yesterday, all these different things. csay2020.com is where you want to go. So how does the site work? Super easy and super cool. You go to csay2020.com. You select the type of incident, write a quick description of what the incident is, add your location, the time, and the date of that incident, and then if at all possible, also add a photo or a video if you're able to. I really strongly recommend that you do that if it's at all possible. It makes it so much easier for the right people to respond appropriately. And then you just click submit. Very easy. From there, you, voting officials, and the media will all be able to see where and what is happening so that it can be corrected. As you can see from the map on the screen, a lot of reports are already coming in and have been logged. This is such a cool thing. This is the best of America. We are literally crowdsourcing election integrity, election security, and you can be a part of that. csay2020.com. So that's pretty much it for today, folks. I want to thank all of our guests who joined us today, Michael Steele and Lee Evans and Clint Watts. And also a quick thing for all of you, a thing that you can do for tonight. This is a new one for you. It's very, very cool. I hope that you get a chance to be a part of it. The Lincoln Project is throwing a troll stomping party. Yes, a troll stomping party. That's what we're calling it. If you want to learn more about how to help find and take down purposely misleading videos, we've been talking about misinformation on this show from day one. You can now be part of the army that starts to identify them and take them down. Join the Lincoln Project on Zoom tonight. That is the Zoom meeting ID number that's on the screen right now. You want to write that down, the Zoom meeting ID number, so that you can join our troll stomping party tonight. You can participate in a fun experiment, a great opportunity for people to get together and help to save our democracy. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Zoom. This is going to be a lot of fun, and we will be doing a lot more of this in the future with the Lincoln Project as well. And I'm telling you, it is so much better than video games. It is a lot of fun, and you will literally be contributing to saving democracy as we know it in our country. So we're going to close today, as we have every day this week, with our closing argument. We're in literally the final days of this election, and the candidates are out there at their rallies and their events and making their closing argument as to why you should vote for them. And so we're bringing our closing argument to you as well today. And because I want to make sure I get my facts right, I'm going to be reading some of this to you. Donald Trump maybe is not so concerned about facts. I think that they matter. And when it comes to the economy, I think we need to address what I would suggest is a crazy idea that if it wasn't for the pandemic, Donald Trump would just be winning this thing in a landslide because of the economy. Here are the facts. More small businesses have gone out of business under Donald Trump than during the Great Recession. What's more, Trump's trade wars have been a failure. He has so far imposed $80 billion worth of new taxes on the American people by levying tariffs on thousands of products. That's equivalent to one of the largest tax increases in decades. The total loss of jobs due to those tariffs may rank somewhere as high as 300,000 jobs. And that's a problem that we don't even know the exact number, because this administration has purposely obfuscated and kept information from us on this issue like they have on so many other issues. You should know what that exact number is, and it's because of the way this administration functions that we don't. Trump has spent $28 billion bailing out farmers that he sent into an economic tailspin to begin with. It was his trade wars that created the problems for our farmers. He spent more than double what was spent on the auto bailout. And then when we look at those numbers, and I think this is the kicker with all of it, the average payment, the payout for the bottom half of our farmers who needed that support from the country was only $2,469.49. How much help is that when you are literally trying to save your livelihood, trying to save the family farm? And when it comes to the economic impact of the pandemic, it has been devastating. We all know nearly 36 million Americans have lost their job under this pandemic. A record number of people are behind on their rent, unable to pay their mortgages, and the impact has been particularly difficult on low income and minority families and women as well. Donald Trump, in spite of his bravado and his books and his apprentice personality, was a failure as a businessman. He went bankrupt over and over again and bailed himself out with other people's money. He has failed this country on the economy. He has failed lower income families who are working as hard as anybody else, trying so hard to take care of their families, to keep a roof over their heads, to put food on the table for their children. He has failed women business owners. He has failed small business owners. And regardless of the pandemic, Donald Trump has not met the bar necessary on the economy to get another 4 years. That's our closing argument today on Donald Trump and his failure on the economy. And I'll throw in there, just so that to add to that, Joe Biden has advanced a plan to create 7 million new jobs. Dozens of economists have endorsed his plan. And the thing that Joe Biden understands about the economy that Donald Trump doesn't is that nothing can happen. We cannot fix it. We cannot rebound until we have confronted and controlled the pandemic. Donald Trump refuses to even acknowledge that point. That's our closing argument on the economy today. Thank you so much for being with us. We will be back here again tomorrow at 2:30 Eastern Time on Vote for America with LPTV.
This is America, and it's hurting. Right now, we're getting knocked down by the very people who should be lifting us up. Our families and our neighbors are sick, and we're being lied to. They want to scare us into believing it has to be this way. It doesn't. In the past, when change was needed, we've stepped up. Now, it's time to step up again. This moment is not about Democrat or Republican. It's about being on the right side of history. We must set aside our differences, stand together, united, and ask, what can I do to help? It's time to put people ahead of politics, to put country over party. It's time to vote for America.
My name is Steve. I live in Arizona. I think we shouldn't go in this direction, really. To try to analyze the president or something like that, it's a total waste of time. We need to stay on track and stay on the message, which is this is about saving the soul of the United States, and Biden is the best person to do that.
This is John from North Carolina. My question is this. What do you say to a Trump supporter who says that before we had to shut down because of COVID, Trump built one of the best economies in a long time, so that we should vote for Trump because once we get past COVID, which we eventually will, then Trump's economy will have the chance to reignite?
What makes you so certain that he won't stay and fight?
Well, he'll be arrested by the Secret Service at noon on January 20th for trespassing in the residence of the President of the United States. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
His term expires at noon on January 20th. The winner of the election will be the next President of the United States. And he can go out and do all the vandalism that he's going to do, but in the end, it changes nothing. He will cede power. The American people are sovereign. We are in charge. We will decide who leads us, and he will go. He will be defeated